Welcome to Running in the 70s, where we interview, meet, and get to know athletes of all kind who were running in the 70s. I'm your host, Matthew Kleinowski.
Today on the podcast, we're in Pennsylvania with a long-term coach who started running in the 70s, set his high school record, went to university in Pennsylvania, ran with Allegheny Nike, and is finishing up his official high school coaching career really on top, as good as it gets. Welcome today on the podcast, Rick Davanzati. Hi, Rick.
Hi, Matt. How's it going?
Great. Let's tell everyone your origin story as an athlete and as a runner.
Like many young kids at that time, I started playing in Butler, they called midget football. And I was a tiny kid, got beat around a lot. But the coach had us run before practice started. I always seemed to be out in front of the older kids. One of the other players on the team was going out for cross country and suggested that I might want to come out for cross country and run. Another guy that worked part-time for my father, starting quarterback on the football team, knew this little bit of running, would come down to our junior high, pick me up 3 days a week, take me to the varsity track practice where I met Bill Lennox, who would ultimately move on to Slippery Rock University. Met him and some other people like Mike Franco and Bill Rose that ran for Butler High School at the time. And that was pretty traumatic from one standpoint, that I would run 400s with them and they would run a 400 jog recovery. I'd go under the bleachers and dry heave for most of the practices. But it was something that gave me a positive outlook on my life, that I knew that I might be good at it sometime. Ultimately went out for cross country as a ninth grader. It's just done a world of good for me. Changed me from being a shy little introverted boy to being much more outgoing, being able to sit here and talk with you today. That was really my origin.
What year was your ninth grade year?
1970.
And how big was the school and how big was the team?
The school had roughly 1,000 kids graduating each year. We had 25 to 30 boys on the team.
Apart from running with those kids before you went out, how was the coaching? What was your relationship with the coach? And looking back, how informed was he about training, and what was training like in 1970?
My coach was a gentleman by the name of Dick Collodi. He was a throwing coach and came from a school up north of Butler called Montauk. He was the head boys track coach and also the cross-country coach for the first 2 years I was there. In hindsight, I'm not 100% sure exactly how much he knew, but he seemed to know quite a bit about distance running. I think he was a student of the sport. He actually looked and read a lot, knew a lot about distance running as such, but we did a lot of repeat interval type of training, as well as throwing in a day or two of distance.
Back then, was that a couple dual meets every week?
Yes. Throughout my high school career, it was usually one dual meet a week, maybe an invitation on the weekends. Some years, like my senior year, heck, we had 3 dual meets and an invitation in 1 week, which was tough.
Well, and what equipment did you have in terms of shoes? When did you get your first pair of shoes that were not Converse or something?
That was in ninth grade. They were Adidas, but they were pretty nondescript. And by today's standards, I wouldn't put them on my feet.
You eventually got your school 3,200 meter record. How was your progression and your success from ninth grade through your senior year?
First off, I actually didn't have the school record. I got within a second and a half of the 2-mile record. Sorry to correct you there, but
we'll have to correct the internet.
The school record was 940.7 by Bob Wilson, who went to NC State. Then my senior year at the WPIAL Championships, I ran 942.4 for 2 full miles. I was 8th at the WPL championships. My progression was pretty quick. My first year, I hadn't really run, but I ran well enough that at the WPL championships or in cross country, the coach had me as the 7th runner over a senior that year. I want to say I finished 48th in the WPIL, but that was at a time that they took 3 or 4 teams. My recollection isn't real great there. 3 or 4 teams from 3 different regions, North, Central, and Southern, to the WPIL championships. I think it was 4 teams each. So you ended up having 12 teams there of 7 kids on each team. And I felt very proud of that my freshman year. My sophomore year, I ran as the 1 or 2 athlete on the team in all the dual meets. I ended up getting hurt. I had an issue with my ankle, which led to them taping it and straining a groin hamstring type thing. So I didn't run the WPL qualifier or championships that year. We finished 5th. At that time, they took the top 3 teams and the top 10 individuals. It didn't matter whether you were on a team or not. If you weren't in the top 10 overall, you didn't go. We had one boy go, Dennis Natus, who had finished 6th or 8th at the WPL championships that year. My junior year, won the Northern qualifier, went to the WPL championships and finished 14th, which meant that I didn't go to the state meet that year. My senior year, I ended up finishing 6th overall and going to the state championships where I got 22nd, which wasn't a medal winning performance like it would be today. They only medaled the top 20. I felt pretty good about that because of the fact that at the WPL championships, I was in 11th place with 300 meters to go. And I'm sure you've heard of Russ Cerny from North Allegheny. He was standing on a tee with 300 meters left to go, and he yelled at me. I had gone to a cross-country camp in Grove City for 3 years, and he was one of the people that ran it. He knew my team wasn't going to go, and he was cheering for me, and it gave me the impetus to speed up and move from 11th to 6th, and it felt really good.
What year was that?
My senior year, the fall of 73.
1973. The Pgh State cross country meet is at Penn State.
Correct.
What was your experience there? Bigger race, bigger field?
I was very nervous, but I was told at one time that, hey, it's just like any other race. It's just a lot more kids. I tried to focus on that, warm up real well. Coach had me get in the car and wait because it was chilly that morning, but the sun was out. I got a little sort of car sick. I'm naive yet. Didn't feel real well when I went to the starting line. Got out quick. Didn't really run the type of race I normally ran. I didn't have a lot of leg speed, so I would normally go out hard for me, but not hard for other people. I went out a little quicker, slowed in the middle, and then came on over the last 600 meters or so. That race, it was exciting because in front of me was a boy from Gateway, Rob Allison, who had finished 5th at the WPL championships right in front of me. He and I, not really working together, me chasing him and him trying to hold me off over the last 600 meters. We went from 48th to 21st and 22nd over the last 600 meters of the course. I think if the course would have been about another 50 meters, we both would have medaled.
Did you know what place you were in? Did you know you were out of the 20s?
Yes. At that point, when I said about 48th or so, yeah, I knew I was back, but I knew I could run with Rob. And he and I both were what I like to call negative leg speed people, strength, endurance type people. And the further we went, the better we got. And so I hung on to him for dear life and just ran as hard as I could.
And the course then was just 2.5 miles.
Correct. Oh, definitely. It was 2.5. And I know by today's standards, we both may have, can't say it positively, but we probably would have both medaled at that time because of the type of runners we were.
What kind of training were you doing by your senior year? What was your mileage for cross?
I didn't really keep track of a lot of mileage. I would say we were probably doing miles a week. It wasn't high mileage. We did a lot of the repeat type of stuff, but we also did some longer repeats. I vividly remember on a golf course in Butler here, my coach having me run 2 times 2 mile repeats with 3 minutes recovery between it. So I guess that you can almost say it was like threshold pace at that time. It's just one of those workouts that sort of sticks in your mind. I ran
Okay.
two times 2 miles in 40 to 10:45, and which is what, 5:20 pace? Yeah. And that made me feel really confident in myself that I could do that.
You mentioned that your coach changed. How was the impact for you with a new coach? Do you know why?
The other gentleman at the time, Dick Commodi, great guy. He actually knew my father growing up. He took an administrative position with the school district. He became a principal. At that time, if you were a principal, you weren't allowed to coach, be a paid coach. And as a result, he had to step down from his coaching duties. There, a gentleman by the name of Tom Hammonds, who was very knowledgeable, stepped in. Tom was the younger brother of Howard, who was a former school record holder in the mile. If you look through the programs at the state meet at 1961, Howard, his older brother, was the state champion. That was the very first year Butler ever had a cross-country team. He wins
wow.
the state meet, and Tom is one of his younger brothers, actually placed somewhere between 7th or 8th at the state meet the following year. So Tom had a decent background in running. Both of them had been basketball players, but Tom was a heavy interval guy and repeat person, which was difficult for me training wise, because most of that was geared towards leg turnover, and I struggled somewhat with that. But it ultimately helped me at the WPL championships in track that year, where I was able to get close to the school record in the 2 mile.
Were you growing between 9th and 12th grade? Did you change shoes, and did your physical weight and height change?
Yes, most definitely it changed. I would say I was about 5'3" as a 9th grader and 102 pounds. By the time I was a senior, I was 5'6", 5'6.5", 122 to 125 pounds. So I did mature physically quite a bit.
What kind of academic student were you?
Above average, but I wasn't like CJ Singleton or Drew Griffith, who were in the top 10 in the class. We graduated with 980 other kids. I was in the top 20%.
And what was your outlook on college then, and the idea of running after high school?
I really wanted to do that. I did want to go to school. I knew from a fairly young age that I wanted to teach. I can't give you exact reasons why. I knew from about my sophomore year that I thought I would want to work with kids. Maybe part of it was the fact that some of the personal things that went on in my life, like I said, I was shy and introverted, and running was doing a lot for me. And so that it made me feel that way. And I wanted to give a little bit, that
Nice.
it was starting to take me places. I got to do things I hadn't done before. And that led to me going into education.
How did you pick Slippery Rock? Also, what was going on in the bigger world of running? How much attention were you paying to running outside of the high school level as a fan?
Very early on, I would say freshman, sophomore year, it was something I felt I was going to be good at. So I latched on to that. I read the Jim Ryan story. I'm like, oh, wow. His very first mile was 5:36 or 5:37. The very first time I ran a mile, it was 5:39. It's like this feeling you could be him type of thing.
Mhm.
I filled out very quickly. I didn't have the leg speed to do that. But that kind of stuff felt really good. B. Fontaine is on the rise, of course. Frank Shorter in 1972. You start to have that the beginnings of the running boom. I read a lot, avid reader of track and field news. Without the media, the social media and stuff, technology that we have today, anything that I could read dealing with track and field, I read. I was one of those stats guys that knew who the top 5 guys in the U.S. were. I couldn't name them now, but and their times and all of that kind of thing.
What was going on in Butler and girls sports by the time you were a senior? Did they have a girls team?
They started a girls team. I want to say it was my junior year in track. They did not have a girls team in cross country.
What about picking Slippery Rock? Anyone there? You mentioned the connection. with the one coach.
Actually, I was recruited by Lou Sutton at IUP and actually went out and visited and met
Ed
I.
Fry.
I was very impressed with him and what he was able to do in terms of he was still running at that time a lot. I met a number of the different athletes on the team at that time. Donnie Friedline in particular, I had met at the cross-country camp in Grove City. He and I were pretty good friends. I actually had another teammate of mine from Butler, Jeff Schnorr, who was at Slippery Rock. He had broken Howard Hammond's mile record at Butler in 1972. I seemed to click with a number of the guys there. And the fact that I had known Coach Lennox from when I was in 8th grade there, again, I was still somewhat introverted and it was just a safe place. It was close enough to home that if I had any issues, I could be home in a half an hour.
How was the transition then to the academic self-dependence of a university and going to your first varsity or college workouts? How all that transition work for you?
The transition running-wise worked pretty well, other than if I didn't run well, I got depressed. I was a little bit immature that way. It probably might have been a good idea to have sat out a year and then gone to college, but I thought if I would have done that, I may not have ever gone. So I jumped in with 2 feet and it all worked out for the better for me. I ultimately became part of the 5-year plan, so to speak, not a 4-year plan. In the fall, the workouts went fine. As I said, if I ran poorly, I was depressed. I missed some classes. So academically, I struggled a little bit. So I wasn't eligible in the spring to run track. And that's when I realized, hey, running's a big part of your life, but you're here for an education, as my mother told me. And I got things straightened out there academically after that second semester, and things turned around quite well for me.
Slippery Rock was part of the Pennsylvania State College Association. And also, were they Division III when you got there, or did they move to Division? Do you remember that?
Yes, I do very vividly, because my freshman year, we were Division II. We had a number of outstanding runners on the team at the time, Jeff Carr in particular, but we didn't go anywhere in terms of nationals my freshman year. My sophomore year, we were still Division II. We ran in the NAIA qualifier regional meet. We finished second to Edinburgh there, I believe, third at the least. And we had the option to go, and Coach Lennox actually took us to Salina, Kansas for the NAIA championships at Edinburgh. Ended up winning. My sophomore year in cross country went pretty well. I was the first or second runner almost every meet. In fact, we had a meet where we ran 4 different teams at halftime. IUP was one of them, Cal U, Shippensburg, and Clarion. I was lucky enough to win that one in front of the hometown crowd at halftime, and we beat all 4 teams. And it was almost like a tiebreaker with IUP. The one gentleman I mentioned, Mike Franco, ended up being our 5th man and passed blonde-haired, I can't think of his name.
Kunkelman?
Yes, Dan Kunkelman. Thank you.
Wow. Dan will have to hear this and hear about getting reminded about getting passed again.
At least according to Mike, he passed them right there, and we ended up beating them 27-28, I believe it was, in front of the hometown crowd, which was really nice. That same year, in the spring, I actually got injured. I had a back issue. The reason this is so vivid is the fact that we held Division II Nationals in the spring of 76 at Slippery Rock, with Steve Scott winning the 1500. Larry Myricks, silver medalist at the Olympics in the long jump, was there. Yeah, you name it. It was a who's who of outstanding athletes. The following year in 77, we dropped down to Division III, D3.
That opened up some opportunities and some great success for Slippery Rock. One guy I competed with in my short career was Pete Lucas on the track. course, George Cronkleton had spectacular success at Division III Nationals. We'll talk about those seasons. I want to talk about the facilities for people that passed through there and got a chance to run there. This Slippery Rock indoor track was special. It wasn't so much unique as the only one, but it was one of the few, and it was quite a different track. I ran an indoor mile there my freshman year.
That track was something else, boy. The fact that it was a flat track and the one end had a wall, a curved wall with a garage door type of thing, and that if you tried to lean in on the turn, you could end up rubbing against the wall and getting the big strawberry or getting pulled right directly into the wall. It was really nasty at times because I did walk out of there once or twice with a strawberry on my shoulder because I leaned in a little bit too close. And the track itself, you couldn't wear spikes on. The best we had were those waffle racers that you have in the background of your screenshot here. And the track itself was, I believe it was called Grass Tex. It was almost like a mixture of asphalt and plastic, and it didn't really give. The track was still there. No, well,
it didn't feel like running on. Those waffles are more grass shoes, I think, and that track did not feel like grass.
No, it did not feel like grass. I wore those a couple times, but they hurt my feet on that track, and I do remember wearing a pair of what were the Saucony Racers or Saucony Racers that I wore there a couple times.
Did you compete indoor track? And what was your outdoor track events?
I competed the 2 mile indoors, though I did run every now and then the mile, but that was few and far between. It was usually when we had the rock relays, that's relay meet. Like I said, the 2 mile was the standard. And unlike today where everything's an invitational type thing that they go to, we had dual meets with other schools, other universities in the state college system. I believe Malone came over from Ohio, some other schools. And that was like high school race.
You guys would see Edinburgh a lot.
Oh, yes. And that was the second time I would meet Sam Baer because Allegheny Community College would bring runners up. Mentioning Sam, I actually met him when I was at the Grove City cross country camp. He came up and spoke, and they had a drawing for some Allegheny Community College t-shirts, and I won one of those. Well, in a drawing, so that was nice. But yeah, at Slippery Rock, the indoor track season was really unique. That's for sure.
And did you compete against our departed friend, Donnie Friedline, at all?
Not a lot. He usually ran some shorter events indoors. And when we moved to outdoors, he was the 800, 1500 type, even into the mile relay, running the 400. And I was a 5,000, 10,000 with emphasis on the 10,000.
Okay. So, and who were some of the people that were your rivals then?
In terms of
that you were seeing regularly in these?
Well, Edinburgh, IUP, Clarion, the state colleges we ran against. In terms of individuals, everybody that probably from IUP, like Dan Kunkelman, Dick Wolf was there, Donnie Friedline. We're talking more like cross country here. And later on, I remember Ken Shirley and Mike Higgins, but I can't remember whether they were actually there when I was there at Slippery Rock, because both of them ran for Allegheny Nike for a period of time.
We'll move on to your ending at Slippery Rock and association with Allegheny. But who do you remember from Edinburgh? Yeah, from Edinburgh.
Lou Jordan, Kevin Foley, Lou Champney. These are all, God, I'm forgetting. And Mark Muggleton, that I actually listened to most of what Pete had to say. Mark was there. Beardsley, I think, was older, was younger as well. And the boy from the guy I always competed against because he came to the Tri-State Coaches Invitational in cross country. He went to Austintown Fitch. Delvin Baylor was his name.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah. He and I competed quite a bit. In fact, he finished my junior year in track. He finished second in the 10,000. I was third at PSACs. But yeah, those are some of the different guys that I competed against.
What was your outlook after the 5-year plan had come to fruition, you got a degree. Did you got your student teaching in? What future for running for you at that point?
We had gone to D3 Nationals twice in cross country the last 2 years. That would have been the fall of 70 and 77. And it was held in Ohio at Case Western Reserve both years. I never really got to travel real far other than going to Calvin College in Michigan twice and Salina, Kansas. And then in track, I qualified 3 years in a row for D3 Nationals. And that was a treat. First 2 years, it was really hot. The last year, it was pouring down rain, and I got sick beforehand. I had the fourth fastest qualifying time, D3, in the spring of 79. But being sick, they started 24 runners. I ended up as the last official finisher, 18th. 6 people had dropped out, and things just didn't go very well for me. I ran well at the Penn Relays, ran 30:15 to qualify. That was actually the winning time at D3 Nationals that year. It was enjoyable. I did student teach at Butler in the fall of 78. I helped my old coach, Tom Hammonds, coach the team. I actually ran with the kids, which was really nice. Made some really good friends there. I was 23 years old at that time when I did my student teaching. So I was working with 18-year-old young men. And one of the young men that went to Pitt later and ran some, I became friends with him. John Hutchison was best man at his wedding. This is one of those sports where you can get close with the kids that you coach, and they become friends for life. So
then you did some coaching with Malcolm East, and how did you get connected with Allegheny Club?
With Allegheny Nike, most of it was either Allegheny Community College kids after they had closed the program down, or PSAC kids, many of which were from IUP. And why can't I think of Kim's last name?
Kim Burke. Yeah.
Burke. He was a really nice guy. And I think he was a proponent of me getting on the team. I was friends with a lot of those guys that were on Allegheny Nike. And I asked some of them, like Rich Bogarty, a guy from Edinburgh that I forgot to mention earlier there. He was a year older than I was, which was a good friend of mine. Talked to Sam Bear and Neil Cohen about having me on the team. And I went down to Beaver County to Pappin's 10K. And they said if I ran a certain time or within a certain range, they'd welcome me into the team. And I went down and ran within that range. Next thing I knew, I was wearing that. At that time, it was the bright yellow Allegheny Nike uniform, and found out that they gave a lot of different uniforms out in different colors that we wore over the years.
Yeah. So you had a really good result at least once in the Great Race. And you were wearing an Allegheny uniform then.
Right. I actually had on a black and white top with a pair of orange Nike shorts that weren't actually supposed to be going with it, but I thought it went fine. It wasn't quite Halloween, but that's what I wore that day. The shoes were a pair of the Air Mariahs that I loved wearing. I finished third overall in 1984. That was the second time I had run fairly well there. In 83, I ran 29:33 and was seventh. Went back down, and I really didn't think I was going to be able to run that fast again. I ended up running 29:02, was third overall. Greg Beardsley won the race in 28 mid-30s. I think it was 28:35. I can't remember the gentleman's name. He was from Kentucky that was second and ran 28:50 or 51. One of the things I remember about that race is coming down the Boulevard of the Allies. I was hurting. I was running as fast as I could, being gradual downhill. So I got momentum trying, just putting one foot in front of the other, and hear this person yell at me about I was in third. I could catch the guy that was in second. And I'm looking up ahead. I'm like, no way, no way. And here I recognized the voice, looked to my right, and here it was Donnie Friedline on a bicycle riding, cheering me on. It was really great to see him.
Great moment.
And he said, you got a decent lead. You got 10 seconds over fourth, so you're fine. Just keep moving, keep moving. And I think he was the guy that yelled to me too, that with the pace I was running, I could break 29. That gave me some motivation. You get in to the sidewalk area there where you go where Fort Pitt was, and I'm going up over that little footbridge under the overpass. And I'm thinking, I see the finish line and I see second place finisher finishing because I see 28:50 on the board on the clock. And I can do this. I can do this. You get down onto the flat concrete and it changes to the grass for the last 50 or 60 meters. And all of a sudden I hit that grass and there's no give back from the grass. And it felt like my legs were lead. And it was, 29:02.
Now,
So-
6 seconds. Okay, after graduation, how did you find your job in teaching and get started coaching?
In the fall of 79, I was subbing at Butler and at Montauk. I found out who the cross country coach was, and I knew that they still raced out at Butler County Community College. Went out there. They were going to run North Allegheny, and I knew they were going to get hammered, so to speak. They were a bunch of great kids, but I knew where NA was and what they had because I continued to follow them. I introduced myself to the coach, Chuck Tompkins. He and I became very fast friends. I asked him if he needed any help. He obliged me for the rest of that year and the next 4 years that he was the head coach. He and I worked together. I ran with the kids. At the beginning of each season, we would lay out a workout plan. He would take a calendar, I would take a calendar and write out what workouts we wanted to do, when and where, with the meets scheduled in there. And he would ask me why I was doing it this way, gave him opinions. And if he thought my ideas were better than his, he would implement those. If not, he went with what he did. And he really learned quick. He was a former Slippery Rock grad too, didn't run cross country in college, ran high school cross country for a couple years in Newfane, New York, little small single A type school. He and I became really good friends. In fact, he was in my wedding, and I meet him and a couple other former coaches every Wednesday at Panera Bread here in Butler for breakfast. That's how I got my start with cross country, helping Tom Hammonds when I student taught, and then introducing myself to Chuck Tompkins.
We'll preview people that you have recently retired and completed your last year as a full-time coach. But there at the beginning, what was going on in the timing of that? Like you said, we talked about origins of the girls program. When did you get in as the head coach? Let's talk about the beginning of your coaching, how you got into becoming head coach, and
Okay.
what was going on with girls sports then too.
Okay. In terms of the cross country program, I was a volunteer assistant for Tom Hammonds, Chuck Tompkins, a little bit less with the next coach. I went to a number of the practices, all of the meets for Mike Chuba. He coached for 5 years. He stepped down after winning a WPL championship in the fall of 88. The next coach that came in was Malcolm East for 1 year. I went to the meets, but I didn't really help him. He had his own style, and I didn't want to infringe upon what he did because I didn't want some of the kids coming to me and asking different questions and so on. If they had questions, I wanted them to go to him. During that same time period, I was coaching junior high track as well as a paid coach. When Malcolm stepped down after that 1 year, I applied for the head coaching job, but still was leery of becoming the head coach of a varsity program. So I applied for the head position or the junior high position, which was relatively new in the previous 2 years. They hired a woman by the name of Leanne Rigg, who became Leanne Williams. She was married to Mike Williams, who went to Slippery Rock University and ran there. I was accepted as the junior high coach. I coached at the junior high from 1990 through the fall of 2000. I was the junior high coach for 11 years. Leanne was the varsity coach for 5, 90 through 94. She was then replaced, and I didn't apply for the job at the time, by Mike Seibert. He's the head boys coach at Butler and track right now and is the new cross country coach at Butler, taking over for me again. He coached for 6 years. He and I both stepped down in 2000, both for family reasons. In 2000, they hired John Neff, who is the head coach at the superintendent, Mike Strutt. also a Slippery Rock track person and grad, came to me and asked me if I'd come back for 1 year and help John as his assistant because I knew all the kids. I knew the school district working there. I had gotten a full-time teaching position at Butler in 1990 after teaching 7.5 years at Butler Catholic and then subbing for 3.5 more years. That 1 year with John turned into 4 as his assistant. When he stepped down to become a full-time teacher and coach at NA, Tim O'Malley, our athletic director at the time, later head of the WIL, came to me and asked me if I wanted the job. He said, it was yours if you want it. I took a weekend to decide. I said to my wife, how about if I try this for 1 year? I don't want to retire or step aside, not knowing whether I could have done this or not. She said, okay. And 1 year in the fall of 2005 became 19 years as the head coach at Butler. And I just retired this past fall at the end of the season.
Let's just have a few general thoughts on what has changed over those many decades of coaching youth. What's changed in youth? What's changed in the sport, the equipment, your approach? How have you changed over those decades from 1990?
Wow, that's a big question. We'll hit the me first. I guess I went from being a little bit naive as a coach to much more knowledgeable, was always a student of the sport. You're a lifetime learner, got to change with the times. And I did. And that sort of goes into the training aspect of it. It went from real high mileage and a lot of intervals and repeats to really cutting back somewhat on the VO2 max type of intervals that were run a lot, to more of watching the kids. And as I say this to the kids I've coached, they know this phrase pretty well. You never want to go into the well too deep and drain the well dry. You always go up to the kids after the workout's over and say, hey, could you have done another one just like that? And if they say no, you know that they've gone too hard. I think that's something that changed, where when I ran myself a lot through high school and even college, it was one of those deals where, hey, you don't get better without beating yourself, going past those limits. And you found out today, though, that that's a little bit different. The runners I had over the last 10 years have shown that. And that's about when that change really started to take place in my coaching.
Did you have any particular success or challenges or learning with girls, boys, younger, seniors? What are some things on your outlook and advice to new coaches on handling that diversity that you encounter?
In terms of boys and girls, there's definitely a difference there. The total volume on the girls' side usually isn't near what boys can handle. And the way in which they mature, you learn to expect that sometimes the younger girls, freshmen and sophomores, they haven't gone through physical changes, and they actually run as fast as some of the younger boys do. And perfect example of this is in 81, when the girls team first began to be implemented. We had a girl, Denise Cooper, that ran for Butler. Her freshman year, she was 4th in the WIL, 10th at the state meet. Outstanding young lady. Her sophomore year, she began to physically change and ran into all kinds of issues with her hips and so on. Didn't qualify for the state meet until her senior year again. Ended up 50th at the state meet, but then went on to Slippery Rock after she grew into her body and learned how to train. Ended up running real well at Slippery Rock. Afterwards, she was in the mid-17s for 5,000 on the roads. So she adjusted gradually. Differences there with the boys and the girls. You always got to watch that. Overall, athletes today sometimes come from backgrounds that aren't overly athletic with all the technology. I didn't come in until it was dark when I was a little kid living on Patterson Avenue in Butler here. We were out all day. We left early in the morning, like 9 o'clock. We went and played with our friends, might go home for lunch, home for dinner, and then we were back out on the streets again, playing kickball, going out. Many of the kids today don't have that. they're on their phones or playing games. You got to watch the volume that you give the kids early and make sure that they're pretty well conditioned before you start to up the mileage. It's not rocket science, but at the same time, I've made my share of mistakes at times thinking, okay, these kids are good. But then some can get little nagging injuries that you got to really watch and just say, hey, we're going to sit you back you off, get you into a pool or get you on a bike. I'm lucky enough that I've had some bicycle trainers. We put the bikes up and have kids ride a stationary bike. That's one way to get around some of that. But yeah, it's different.
What's happened with the parents over the decades? Has that changed?
It's changed a bit from the standpoint that when I first started coaching, I was younger than a lot of the parents. Now I'm older than most of the parents. And the number of parents I actually had either as students or as athletes myself. CJ Singleton's dad, I never technically coached him. He was coached by Mike Chuba in that interim where I went to practices but didn't really coach, and I went to all the meets and cheered on the kids and went to the banquets and so on. His dad, Chris, was on the last WPIL championship team at Butler, and he was a student of mine at Butler Catholic. So I've known Chris since he was in 8th grade. The way in which the parents have changed, and this is society in general, I believe. I notice this more in the classroom than I do in coaching, and that is that something happened in the classroom. It was like, okay, don't worry about it. We'll take care of it at home. Today, it's, why'd you do that to my child? What do you have against my child? Is that type of thing. But those are few and far between. Generally speaking, the parents are great. I have parents that come up to me. What can we do for the program? How can we help you make the program better? CJ's parents, Drew Griffith's parents. I have parents, a family, the McClisters. They have 2 girls, outstanding people. The father was a 800-meter sprinter for us. Him and his brothers were sprinters too. And they're outstanding people that just try to enhance everything.
Yeah, that must make going to work and going to the activity every day a lot more pleasant. Oh, let me ask you then about the spectacular athletes you've had in the last decade or so. Or at what point do you see somebody and say, he's going to be faster than I ever was? And how do you adjust to that? And how do you set goals with someone at the beginning like Singleton or Griffin that you see at the beginning and say, there is no limit here?
First off, say that from the very outset, there were kids that I said, these kids are faster than I am or will be faster than I am. And what can I do to get them there? In coaching myself, that's the one thing I cherished. And the kids are like, I'm going to be faster than you. I said, that's great, because that's why I'm coaching. I hope you are faster than I am. That shows that what I'm doing is right. And if you look at the top 10 3,200-meter list, I believe every boy on there at some point in time, I helped coach or had some interaction with as a coach, which makes, and in the 1,600 is very close, as well as the 800. And it just makes you feel really good about that.
Yeah, that's the kind of legacy you want to have as a coach.
And when you say these young men, that where you see it in them, with some of them, I've seen it fairly early because we put on an elementary school track meet in Butler. You see it in the kids that run the mile that come out, and boy, oh boy. I also had a cross-country meet for elementaries for 6th graders that I ran for 21 years. You can see it in them, and you try to get them out, and when they come out, you're drooling a little bit, so to speak, that, hey, these kids have ability, and you talk to them and you tell them what their potential is, but you keep them aware of the fact that potential isn't something that they've achieved yet. It's going to take some hard work and dedication to the sport. And usually when I talk to them like that, maybe not the first year, but the second year, when they begin to see some jumps, they latch on to that. There have been a number of kids that have done that throughout my career.
Yeah, you've coached people that most recently were in the Olympic trials, won nationals, set state record, state champions. You have a long list of great success. How does it change when you've got an elite athlete superior to others on the team? Have you had that where different times an athlete needed different training than the rest of the team? How did that all work out in your planning?
That's a good question, but I'd like to preface this by saying that, and I tell the kids this, doesn't matter where you are on the quote, like hierarchy or spectrum of athletes that we have, that nobody's any better than anybody else as a person and as a runner. Sure, this guy might be a lot faster or this girl might be a lot faster than you are. To me, as a person, you're equal to them. And that if you're willing to come here every day and work hard, I'm going to give you my time, as much time as what I'm giving our number one guy. That seemed to work very well within our program. And I hope the kids that I've coached look at it that way too. But to your question, you sit down with the kids and they know once you've started to make the workouts up that, okay, this boy or this girl is this much faster than everybody else. So their training is going to be a little bit different. Generally speaking, though, the overall plan in terms of workouts was very similar. The volume that Drew was doing, or CJ, or Noah Beveridge, or some of the other kids that I've had might have been a little bit higher in terms of volume or number of repeats. But generally speaking, the workouts themselves have been very similar to one another. There is the off workouts where Drew would run something different than the vast majority of them in track, when I felt Drew needed something specifically different from all the other athletes that we have. I did individualize the workouts quite a bit. I like to individualize the workouts from the standpoint that, okay, today we're going to be doing some mile repeats. Not everybody's going to do miles. Some of the girls and some of the JV type of level boys will be doing 1,200 meter repeats, tempo repeats, because it's roughly about the same amount of time involved in it. You're going to get the same amount of recovery, but the total distance is going to be a little bit different because I want you out there for about the same amount of time and you're going to be finishing at the same place. You may start at a different place type of deal.
Let's talk about success with your super elite runners, the ones that made the Olympic trial. Drew Griffith most recently winning nationals last fall, 4-minute mile, and how you were involved with them in handling success. Did you have much of a role? How did they handle this elite success, and what did you have along the ride with them?
Those two individuals, I never really had to tell them how to handle that. They both are very humble type kids in terms of not being braggarts, so to speak, or being cocky. When they crossed the finish line, if it was something they achieved, you could see the excitement on their face and throwing a fist up in the air or punching across their body or whatever. But just listening to them talk, being interviewed by Phil Grove from Mile Split or anybody else that might have interviewed them, you can tell that they're somewhat reserved in that respect. The most I've ever said to them is always be humble. Everybody's the same, whether you're the number one athlete or whether you're the last boy or girl on the team. And hopefully that sunk in. In all cases, these kids have been raised right by their parents, a little bit of accolades for them, because the kids have grown up well and been raised right.
Everybody who's coached or worked with kids in any capacity eventually learns. We all have to be aware that kids are watching. Everybody's listening. Everything you do, every expression you make, someone may key in on and think about and be affected by. So congratulations to you. You're not taking credit for their upbringing, but that role modeling, your personality certainly goes into the mix there. Let's talk about the great success most recently with Drew Griffith. Just exciting in the last year. What was that journey like?
Oh, that's been something that has been, as you said, very extremely exciting. Seeing him just continue to improve and keep going. And by the way, I think he still has a number of big steps to take too, that he's capable of moving on to Notre Dame and beyond. The fact that I retired from teaching in 2019, right before COVID, has helped me be able to travel a little bit and go to some of these larger meets. Usually I either ride with his dad. I've ridden with his dad, or I've flown out. And sometimes the parents, in certain cases, actually even help pay my way, which is extremely nice of them. And I get a little emotional when I do talk about that kind of stuff. But it's been extremely exciting being able to share with them, especially now with Drew and CJ, the heights to which they've been able to run to. And I don't know what else to say other than I know I've been part of it, and it's just makes me feel really good. And now that I'm stepping aside, it gives me some great memories.
Let's get into the specific memories of these particular events, the cross-country nationals. What preparation did you do there? What were the expectations, and how did that whole event go for you?
For Foot Locker there out in San Diego, the expectation was to win the race. In terms of goal setting, I would talk to him a little bit about goals for the season at the beginning of the year. We didn't really write stuff down, or I didn't, but that was always in the back of the mind in training and so on, that, hey, we're doing this now. T at times was a little bit worried about having a kick. He was worried about that from his sophomore year when he couldn't kick with CJ and so on. I said, hey, you're somewhat physically immature. When you mature and when you get stronger, we're going to be doing some more of that, more of the speed that you're going to need, and it will come as you get older. He got a little bit more leg speed as a junior, not quite enough to go with Brian Nicola at the state meet. But all of a sudden this year, during cross country and track, that kick developed and came. And I put a lot of that to the 200s and 300s that we would do after doing some critical velocity and tempo work or threshold work. Would do 4 to 6 200s or 300s afterwards. And that gave him that confidence, especially being able to run those after running the earlier part of the workouts, and emphasizing stay relaxed, smooth. You shouldn't strain on these. You should feel comfortable. That really helped him. And as both of them are highly intelligent, they wouldn't be accepted into Notre Dame if they weren't. They both learned from their mistakes in racing. Especially vivid in my mind is Drew would always carry, even today in the middle of a cross country race or distance race, his arm carriage isn't real high, and has a tendency to make people look at him and say, boy, he just looks so smooth. He's not even hardly putting forth any effort. When it comes to kicking, you got to bring your arms up a little bit in order to help lift your knees higher and come off the front of your foot a little bit better. And with him, we worked a series of 200s where I told him, you need to bring your arms up. We did that one day, and I never had to tell him again about doing that in a workout. He purposely, when we did the 200s, his hands would come up. I brought that up to him once. He said, you told me to do that. And most kids you'd have to tell again, hey, bring your arms up, hands up higher. He just learns very fast. Going out to Foot Locker, that was the goal. I asked him what his plans are and give him pros and cons on what I thought are good or bad points of his strategy. And him and CJ and Noah Beveridge all together, those three kids, they're very intelligent. I would try to draw from them what they wanted to do. And again, give them pros and cons, and would go with what they thought they could do if I felt it was right.
Seems to have worked well. Drew ended up being the first Pennsylvanian to win Foot Locker Nationals, right?
Right.
Then in track, his mile time, I know 3:57, where it ranks on the
sixth.
Where it ranks on the all-time list. What was his progression there, and what was your outlook at the beginning of track? Was there a time target?
Last year as a junior, he had run 4:07. The goal was to try to get 4. I initially thought, boy, this is going to be tough for him to go under 4 with a 7-second drop after he had gone from 4:16 as a sophomore to 4:07. Indoors, he appeared to be a bit quicker speed-wise, though his initial 800 indoors was only 1:59. He then went up to Boston and ran the New Balance Grand Prix race mile up there, and he ran 4:02.7. All of a sudden, it's like, this is very possible. I was a little afraid at first because of the fact that I knew he didn't have a huge amount of break between cross and indoors, and I was hoping he wasn't too far along in the training. But those fears were quickly allayed by the fact that the type of training he was able to do and some of the other meets that he ran. He's always been a person that I've looked at as had a huge aerobic engine. From the time he was a little boy, when he ran that 6th grade track meet that I mentioned, he just looked like he glided along the races when he would finish, even like Foot Locker. He comes across the line, he takes a couple big breaths, and he has somebody interviewing him, and he's talking almost normally. That it's there. It's just the timing of workouts to get him to that point and not do it too early in the year.
Maybe one last thing about that. There definitely is some chatter and the whole sport fans discussing everything and everybody does. And I did see some things of saying, oh, this kid needs to go straight pro. Look at that talent engine. You talk about their personalities and their intellect and going to Notre Dame and pursuing education, not just taking the sport as a professional.
Right. Like I said, from a very young age, he knew what his goals out of running were. They're probably adjusted a little bit because of the level that he's at right now. But he told me that as a sophomore, once we saw how good he could be, I asked him about it, what he wanted to get out of running. Didn't say, hey, do you want to get an education? I asked him, what do you want to get out of running? And his answer was, he wants to pay for his education. He wants to get an education because that's the most important thing. And I believe that's still first and foremost in his mind, is to get the education. And anything else that he's running wise is gravy.
Congratulations to both of you on that, as you helped him get there and achieve that goal for him. That's very fantastic. Now, what's going on with you now? Coaching has been done. Teaching finished up several years ago, and you've now officially finished coaching. How are you going to off-ramp that?
I think coaching would have still been a really big part of my life because it wasn't in the plans until the last 3 years about quitting. It's been a very nice ride. I've enjoyed this, but my wife and I are going to be moving to Austin, Texas. And the reason for that is my first family, our daughter, our only child, has lived there for 5 years. And in the last 2 years, she's been on us to move to Austin. She's 29, is going to be getting married here probably within the next month or so, and has been wanting to start a family. And we found out recently that she's going to make us grandparents here.
More congratulations, yeah.
In late December. So I think the off-ramp is moving to be with family. It's pretty good.
It's been great talking with you, Rick. Yeah, it's been great talking to you. I'm sure we've been on the same course or same track at the same time.
Oh, definitely.
I had a very short career at IUP, but yeah, going through that period that we overlapped in Western Pennsylvania was very special. And same thing, grew up the same way. And I think a lot of people from this era are going to reminisce on their own lives as they hear you talking about that thing that we all shared of the lifestyle and things change. And your great success, you're well-spoken from your early days of being timid. You're a generous person with your athletes, with the students, and with your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Matthew. I really appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed another episode of Running in the 70s. Voices, stories, and memories of athletes who were running in the 70s. Until next time, wherever you are, keep looking forward and don't forget to look back.